Russia's war in Ukraine is forcing a massive global rethink into how geopolitics can cause turmoil in the world economy. European countries are rushing to cut their dependence on Russian energy, and sanctions are having a ripple effect all over the world. Well, here in Asia, people are thinking about what might be next, and what in particular if China follows through one day, maybe soon, on its threat to invade Taiwan. What would that mean for the Asian economy? What would that mean for the world economy? Well, these are pressing questions for Germany too. And Germany's Vice Chancellor Robert Habeck is here in Singapore, co-hosting a conference that's tackling some of these questions. His buzzword is diversification, following through on the idea that Germany has become simply too dependent on its economic ties with China in the last few decades. We spoke to him. Robert Habeck, thanks for speaking to Deutsche Welle. Now, you're here in Singapore trying to get the message out that Germany wants to diversify its economy, that it wants to become less dependent on China. A lot of other countries thinking the same thing. Explain, what is the problem? Why are you doing this?
Well, first of all, this is a conference with quite a tradition and quite a history. It's the 7th conference where German business delegations are meeting their counterparts from the Southeast Asian regions. But this conference now is under different circumstances because of the Russian aggression on Ukraine, energy prices skyrocketing high, also here in this region. And then, of course, hopefully a lesson learned. We have to diversify, as you said. We have also, with regards to raw materials, semiconductors, other critical goods, a high dependence on one supplier, and this is mainly China. And as long as business is open and everything is working fine, this is an advantage, of course, but what if not? And the lesson learned is that we now have to find some security network, and this means that we have to reach out to other regions, and other regions maybe are more interested than before that German businesses, European businesses are coming to them.
Now, you say as long as everything is fine. I mean, thinking about what are the sort of like risk scenarios that could happen within Asia, the Americans are sounding the alarm more and more about the risk of Chinese aggression against Taiwan. The Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, has been saying that this could happen on a much faster timeline than many people had thought. Are you planning for this scenario?
Well, you meaning that China is attacking Taiwan?
Yes.
Well, this is a scenario nobody really can plan for. This is something very, very threatening, and this will have disastrous effect on the whole world. We have seen that a regional conflict like the Russian war on Ukraine has brought the whole world into turbulences. Of course, Central Europe and Germany, but also the rest of the world is affected by that. That would be far more catastrophic. So this is something we definitely have to avoid, and I hope that China knows that the whole world is watching. But of course, there might be scenarios below this catastrophic scenario that still are threatening. Even the idea of an influence of a foreign power that might have its own interests and maybe some interests directed against the sovereignty of the owner state is a threat in itself. So critical infrastructure, goods that come from critical sectors like telecommunication, energy sector, chips and semiconductors must be protected. And this does not mean that there's no possibility to do business, but we have to take care that we have an own grab, an own sovereignty in this field, and this is how we are acting now.
Now, Germany is, as you mentioned, dependent on many imports from China, but it's also quite dependent on exports to China. I just want to pick out one example. I mean, Volkswagen, a household name around the world, it sells 40% of its cars in China. It even says that it has, according to its own numbers, more than 40 factories in China. What happens to those factories if there is some kind of Chinese aggression against Taiwan, if there are international sanctions slapped on China? What happens to all 40 factories?
Well, this is a threat for the company if they would be affected by sanctions, if there would be a catastrophic scenario. Now I've said would be 3 times in one sentence. So they have to know what they are doing. And of course, that would infect the German the German economic it's in itself. If it's a big company like Volkswagen, BMW, Daimler or BASF, that are the four big players in China, if they risk their business model. The question is it a free market, or has politics some possibilities to interact with that? And that we have, and that we will do. We will have a cap on guarantees on investments. So if other companies or the named companies will invest in China above a certain amount, let's say 3 billion, sounds reasonable, they can do that, but we won't guarantee for that anymore. But we will guarantee for more investments in other countries. So this might be a strong push for divesting and going to other countries, because then the German state gives a guarantee that if something is happening, we will pay them out.
But it is quite important, isn't it? The idea that the German government provides effectively a kind of insurance for investments in foreign markets.
It's the way things are working in an open market economy. We can't interfere in the markets and say you are not allowed to. We are not a totalitarian, authoritarian state and say you are not allowed to. What we can do is reform the market rules, and I'm convinced that this will work. So changing the rules of the market will change the market, and this is our way.
But you still are prepared to provide this insurance, this kind of guarantees to some investments in China. Why not just cancel that? Why not just say we're not going to guarantee investments in China anymore?
That might be the case in some sectors that are critical for the infrastructure, critical for the coming technologies, but in general, my standpoint is that we are, of course, interested in trade with China, but not in stupid trade with China. So it must be a level playing field. As long as, let's say, tourism is working fine, then it's working fine. Where's the problem? This is not critical. But there might be some sectors where we say, and we have done that before, that we won't guarantee because we are afraid that the knowledge in some technologies are stolen away if they are invested in China. And on the other hand, if investment from China is coming to the German market, that might also be problematic in some areas, let's say ports, airports, hospitals, but also semiconductor industries, for example.
Now, despite this attempt to reduce dependency on China, your government has recently approved the sale of a stake in Hamburg's port, the most important port in Germany, to a company owned by the Chinese state. Now, it was known that you opposed this deal, but the deal has now been approved. Why has it been approved?
It has been approved with 2/3, not the whole deal, so the amount was lowered below a level where the influence, according to the German law, is not held accountable anymore. So it is a low investment, but you're right. I think it's only a half measure, half victory in a way. I would have preferred that there would be an investment of COSCO, the great Chinese shipping company, in the port of Hamburg.
You would have preferred there was no investment?
Yes, yeah, that's right. But we need to have unity in the cabinet, and this was the only way to get this unity. So it was a step forward, but not the whole way. But it's a process, of course. I mean, we're coming from an idea where politicians, the last three decades, maybe even before that, were saying all the time, China, that's our future, that's our market, and all the investments should go to, all the trade should go to China and coming from China. So what we're doing is something big right now. We're changing the practices of our China strategy and politics. And this is of course, this is a phase, and we have to learn, and we have to think about it. And from the general analysis, going into the details is sometimes complicated. And in that case, the cabinet, existing from three different parties, needed some time to think about it and learn.
Final question. I mean, can you understand some international observers look at Germany and they think it simply hasn't made up its mind about China? It has a confused policy about China.
No, that's wrong, I would say. We have made our mind up about China. We see the problem. We and all of the government, also the Social Democrats in the government, we know the risk. We have a careful analysis of the clump risk in the investments. So this is not the problem. There might be some, I wouldn't say dispute, but different thoughts if it becomes concrete. So if you have if there would be an investment from China and the alternative is huge amount of unemployment in some regions, of course you have to think about that. But the general strategy is completely clear. We want to protect our critical infrastructure. We want to protect our sectors where critical goods and knowledges are developed. And beyond that, we still, of course, want to have a trade relationship with China. It's not decoupling. So it's not, I know that the US is sometimes saying more harsh words, so this is not our way. So we where it's unproblematic, that's not a problem to have trade with China. But in the problematic areas, we have to be more careful than we have been before.
Robert Habeck, many thanks.
Thank you.